The great hall of the Zephyrian palace gleamed with bioluminescent crystal, casting shifting patterns of blue and silver across the assembled crowd. Ambassador Drake Harrison stood at attention in his Earth military dress uniform, acutely aware that every eye in the room was fixed on him with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed disdain. The Treaty of Shared Stars had been signed 3 months ago, ending a war that had devastated both the Zephyrian Empire and the human colonies. Now came the difficult part, building bridges between species that had spent 5 years trying to destroy each other, which was why Drake stood here, participating in what the Zephyrians called the bonding ceremony. As the highest-ranking human officer willing to participate in the cultural exchange program, he would select one of the Emperor's daughters as his bonded mate, a diplomatic marriage meant to symbolize the union of their two peoples. "Let the selection begin," Emperor Zalcris announced, his deep purple skin rippling with formal patterns. "Human Drake Harrison, you may observe the candidates." 7 princesses stepped forward, each more stunning than the last. The Zephyrians were a beautiful species, tall and elegant, with skin that shifted through various shades of purple and blue, large, expressive eyes, and hair that seemed to float as if underwater. Each princess wore ceremonial robes that displayed their rank, their accomplishments, their value. Drake walked slowly down the line, his military training keeping his expression neutral even as he felt the weight of judgment from every Zephyrian noble in attendance. He could hear the whispers, understood enough of their language now to catch words like primitive and barbarian and how dare they. Princess Xandra stood first, the eldest, a renowned military commander who'd led campaigns against human forces. Her purple skin was dark and rich, her bearing regal. She looked at Drake with open contempt. Princess Isolde came next, a brilliant scientist, her robes marked with symbols of her achievements. She studied him like a specimen, her expression clinically detached. Down the line he went. Princess Celine, the artist, Princess Morgana, the diplomat, Princess Vivienne, the philosopher. Each accomplished, each beautiful, each making it clear through their posture and expression that they considered this entire ceremony a humiliating farce. And then, at the very end of the line, stood Princess Ilara. She was smaller than her sisters, more delicate. Her skin was a pale lavender, considered weak among her people, Drake had learned. She wore the simplest robes, marked with no great accomplishments. Her blonde hair, while beautiful by human standards, was another mark against her in Zephyrian society where darker hair indicated stronger genetics. But what caught Drake's attention was her eyes. While her sisters looked at him with contempt, disgust, or cold calculation, Ilara looked at him with something else entirely. Fear and resignation, yes, but also a deep, aching sadness that he recognized all too well. She expected to be chosen. She expected it would be a punishment. Drake had read all the intelligence briefings, knew the political implications of each potential choice. Choosing Xandra would be a power move but would likely result in hostility. Choosing Isolde would advance scientific cooperation. Choosing Morgana would strengthen diplomatic ties. Choosing Ilara would be seen as an insult, selecting the weakest, least accomplished princess, the one the Zephyrians themselves considered nearly worthless. Drake stopped in front of Ilara. She was trembling slightly, trying to hide it. Up close he could see the pale scars on her wrists, barely visible against her lavender skin, but there. He recognized those scars. He had similar ones, though his were from shrapnel, not from. Their eyes met, and in that moment Drake saw everything. The loneliness, the pain, the silent suffering of someone who'd been overlooked and undervalued her entire life. Someone who'd been so desperate once that he'd seen that look before. In the mirror during the darkest days after the Battle of Proxima, when he'd lost his entire unit and spent 3 months in a Zephyrian prison camp. "I choose Princess Ilara," Drake said clearly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. The shock was palpable. Even Ilara's eyes widened with disbelief. Emperor Zalcris's skin flickered through several colors before settling on a disapproving dark blue. "Are you certain, Ambassador Harrison? Perhaps you would like more time to consider." "I'm certain, Your Majesty. Princess Ilara is my choice." The whispers exploded like a detonated bomb. Drake heard the Zephyrian words for insult, mockery, and typical human stupidity. He saw Ilara's sisters exchange looks that ranged from relieved to smugly satisfied. Of course, the primitive human would choose the defective princess. Only Ilara herself looked utterly lost, as if she couldn't comprehend what was happening. The ceremony concluded with formal words and ritual gestures. Ilara was brought forward, her hand placed in Drake's. Her skin was cool to the touch, and he felt her shaking. "Be gentle with her, human," Emperor Zalcris said quietly, though his tone suggested he didn't actually care much either way. "She is fragile." Drake bit back the angry response that rose in his throat. "I will treat her with the respect and care she deserves, Your Majesty." They were given apartments in the diplomatic wing, luxurious by any standard, but Drake noticed immediately that they were far from the royal family's quarters. Out of sight, out of mind. The moment the doors closed behind them, Ilara pulled her hand from his and retreated to the far side of the room, her skin shifting to a pale, frightened blue. "You don't have to be afraid of me," Drake said gently, staying where he was. "I'm not going to hurt you." "Why?" Her voice was soft, musical, nothing like the harsh tones of her father or sisters. "Why did you choose me? Was it to humiliate my family, to show how little you think of this alliance?" "No." Drake slowly lowered himself to sit on one of the low couches, making himself less imposing. "May I be honest with you, Princess? Ilara, just Ilara. I've never been much of a princess." She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture of protection that was universal across species. "And yes, please, I'd like to understand why I'm here. I chose you because of what I saw in your eyes." Drake rolled up his sleeve, revealing the scars that crisscrossed his forearm, some from battle, some from the prison camp, and a few that were more deliberate from darker times. "I recognized a kindred spirit, someone who knows what it's like to hurt so badly you can't see a way forward." Ilara's eyes fixed on his scars, and her skin rippled through several shades of purple before settling on a deep violet sorrow he'd learned. You tried to? After Proxima, yes, I lost everyone I cared about in a single day, spent months being tortured for information I didn't have. When I finally got out, I didn't want to be alive anymore." Drake met her eyes steadily. "But I got help, therapy, medication, time. I learned that the darkness doesn't last forever, even when you're sure it will." Ilara was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she moved closer and sat on the opposite end of the couch, maintaining distance but no longer retreating. "How did you know about me?" "The scars on your wrists, the look in your eyes, the way you stood like you were waiting for another blow to fall." Drake's voice was gentle. "I've seen that look before, felt it myself." I'm the disappointment, Elara said quietly, her skin shifting to that pale, sad lavender. Wrong color, wrong build, no great talents or achievements. My father tried to hide me away, but the treaty required all his daughters to participate. My sisters were relieved when you chose me. Now I'm your problem instead of theirs. You're not a problem, Elara. You're a person who's been treated terribly by people who should have valued you. Drake leaned forward slightly. I didn't choose you to insult anyone. I chose you because I saw someone who needed a chance, someone who deserved better than what she was getting. That's, Elara's voice cracked, that's the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me. Drake's heart broke a little. Then your people have failed you spectacularly. They sat in silence for a while, two broken people from different worlds, connected by pain and the slim hope of healing. What happens now? Elara finally asked. The bonding is official, but we barely know each other. You're not. You don't have to, she struggled with the words. The marriage is political. You don't have to pretend it's real. How about we start with being friends? Drake suggested. We both know what it's like to be alone in our suffering. Maybe we can help each other heal. No pretending, no pressure, just honesty. Elara looked at him with those large, expressive eyes, and for the first time, Drake saw a flicker of hope in them. I'd like that. The first weeks were difficult. Elara had spent years being told she was worthless, and undoing that kind of damage didn't happen overnight. But Drake was patient, drawing on his own recovery experience. He taught her meditation techniques that helped with anxiety. He listened when she needed to talk. He never pushed, never demanded, just offered steady, quiet support. And slowly, Elara began to bloom. Drake discovered she had a wicked sense of humor, often making dry observations about court politics that had him laughing until his sides hurt. She was brilliant with languages and helped him improve his Zephyrian. She loved music and would play this ethereal instrument called a shalter while he worked on diplomatic reports. Most importantly, her skin began to show colors Drake had never seen from her before. Warm purples when she was content, bright blues when she was excited. A beautiful iridescent shimmer when she laughed. They fell into an easy companionship, sharing meals and conversations, learning each other's languages and cultures. Drake taught Elara about Earth, about the vast diversity of human peoples and beliefs. She taught him about Zephyrian history, the parts that never made it into official records, the stories of ordinary people, not just great warriors and leaders. 3 months into their bonding, the Emperor summoned them to a state dinner. It was the first time Elara had been invited to such an event in years. They arrived together, Drake in his dress uniform and Elara in formal robes that he'd helped her select, deep purple with silver threading that made her lavender skin glow beautifully. She still seemed nervous, her skin flickering through anxious shades, but she held her head high. The dinner was predictably awkward, with Zephyrian nobles making barely veiled insults about the charity case princess and her primitive human mate. Drake ignored them, focusing on making sure Elara was comfortable, occasionally whispering translations or explaining human customs when asked. Then Princess Xandra, emboldened by ceremonial wine, addressed them directly from across the table. "Tell me, human, do you enjoy your prize?" Her tone was mocking. "Was selecting the weakest among us some sort of power play, a way to show your contempt for our customs?" The table went silent. Every eye turned to Drake. Elara's skin went pale with humiliation and old shame. Drake felt her start to withdraw to make herself smaller. He'd had enough. Drake stood, his military bearing making him suddenly imposing despite being surrounded by beings who were taller and stronger. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire hall. "You want to know why I chose Ilara? I'll tell you." He turned to address not just Xandra, but the Emperor and every noble present. "I spent 5 years fighting your people. I learned your language, studied your culture, tried to understand what drove us to such violence. And you know what I learned about Zephyrians? You value strength above all else. Military might, scientific achievement, political power. These are the measures by which you judge worth." Drake's voice hardened. "But I also learned that you're so obsessed with strength that you've become blind to it when it takes forms you don't recognize. You see Ilara as weak because her skin is pale, because she's not a warrior or a scientist or a conqueror." He moved to stand beside Ilara, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "But I see someone who survived years of neglect and cruelty from her own family. Someone who endured constant dismissal and derision, who was treated as worthless by the people who should have loved her most. Someone who felt so alone she nearly ended her own life, and yet somehow found the strength to keep going." Gasps rippled through the hall. Ilara's private pain was now public knowledge, but Drake pressed on. "Do you know what we humans call that?" Drake's voice rang with conviction. "We call it courage. We call it resilience. We call it the kind of strength that actually matters. Not the strength to conquer others, but the strength to survive when everything inside you is screaming to give up." He looked directly at Emperor Zalcris. "You have 7 daughters. 6 of them achieved great things because they had every advantage, every resource, every encouragement. Ilara achieved the most difficult thing of all. She survived despite having none of those things. She remained kind in a family that showed her no kindness. She stayed gentle in a world that was harsh to her. That's not weakness. That's extraordinary strength." Drake turned back to Ilara, whose skin was cycling through a dozen colors, tears streaming down her face. "I chose Ilara because she's the strongest person in this room, even if none of you were wise enough to see it. I chose her because she deserves someone who recognizes her worth. I chose her because in a galaxy full of warriors and conquerors, she had the courage to simply be kind." The silence in the hall was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Ilara stood, her skin settling into a color Drake had never seen before, a brilliant, radiant purple gold that seemed to glow from within. She took his hand, squeezing it tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "No one has ever defended you," Drake finished gently. "Then it's long past time someone did." Emperor Zalcris's skin had shifted through several colors during Drake's speech. Now it settled on a deep, thoughtful violet. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with what might have been shame. "Perhaps we have been blind." Princess Isolde leaned forward, studying her youngest sister with new eyes. "Ilara has always been kind, even when we were not. I never considered that might require its own form of strength." Around the table, Drake could see the shift happening, Zephyrian nobles looking at Ilara with confusion, reassessment, a few with dawning guilt. Xandra's skin had gone very still, a single shade of dark purple. "I owe you an apology, sister, many apologies." Ilara's voice was steady when she replied, "Perhaps we can start fresh, all of us." The dinner continued, but everything had changed. Nobles who had ignored Ilara now sought her conversation. Her sisters asked about her interests, her thoughts, treating her as an equal for the first time. Later, alone in their quarters, Ilara turned to Drake with wonder in her eyes. You called me strong, she said softly. You made them see me. I showed them what was always there, Drake corrected. Your strength, your worth, that was never in question. They just needed someone to point it out. Alara moved closer, her skin that beautiful, radiant purple gold again. Drake Harrison, you came here as part of a political arrangement. You chose me for reasons of compassion, not love. I understand that, but I need you to know. She took a breath. You've given me my life back. You've shown me I matter, and I'm falling in love with you for it. Drake's heart stuttered. Over the months, he'd grown to care deeply for Alara, had found himself looking forward to their conversations, cherishing her smiles. But he'd been so focused on helping her heal that he hadn't let himself examine his own feelings. Now, looking at this incredible woman who'd survived so much and still chose kindness, he realized the truth. I'm falling in love with you too, he said. Not because of the bonding ceremony or political necessity, because you're brilliant and funny and kind. Because you make me want to be better. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I've finally found where I belong. When they kissed, Alira's skin blazed with colors Drake had never seen. Joy and love and hope all swirling together in a beautiful display. 6 months later, when the human delegation returned to Earth, Drake and Alira went with them. Not because they had to, but because they'd chosen to build a life together. They became advocates for mental health awareness, speaking openly about their struggles and recovery. They worked to bridge the gap between human and Zephyrian cultures, showing both peoples that strength came in many forms. And late at night, when old fears and painful memories surfaced, they held each other and remembered. They had both survived the darkness. They had both found their way to light. The human soldier had selected the weakest alien princess. And when the real reason came out, it froze everyone in that hall, not with shame at first, but with the shocking revelation that they'd all been blind to the most important kind of strength there was. The strength to survive. The strength to stay kind. The strength to love even when the world had given you every reason not to.